4 soldiers, frozen foxhole, middle of the night in the Belgian forest. And they were already dead, but the guns kept firing. That's not a metaphor. That's not folklore. That's what German soldiers found when they finally crossed that ground at 4 in the morning. 4 American bodies, stiff with cold, wounds hours old. And yet, for 6 straight hours, that position had pinned them down, killed 2 of their men, and stopped an entire SS company from moving through a critical gap in the Allied line. Nobody has ever fully explained how. This is their story. December 1944, the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. If you've never been there in winter, imagine this. Trees so dense the snow barely reaches the ground. Visibility down to 30, maybe 40 yards. Temperatures at night dropping to -12. The kind of cold that gets inside your bones and doesn't leave. The Americans holding this sector were the 99th Infantry Division. Young guys mostly, draftees, teenagers some of them. They'd been sent to the Ardennes because the generals considered it quiet, a rest sector, a place for green troops to get their feet wet without too much risk. They had no idea what was coming. The 4 men at the center of this story were assigned to a small forward observation post, a reinforced foxhole about 400 yards ahead of the main American line, right at the edge of a tree line overlooking the Losheim Gap. Their names were Sergeant Harold Brewer, 24, a mechanic from Dayton, Ohio. Calm, steady, the kind of guy who doesn't panic. PFC Leonard Mowry, 20 years old, farm kid from Iowa, 6 weeks with the unit, still learning. Private Tom Costello, 22, South Boston, quick-tempered, fiercely loyal. And PFC Raymond Haas, 26, a former school teacher from Pennsylvania, the old man of the group, who kept a small, worn copy of Emerson in his breast pocket. 4 ordinary men in an extraordinary place at the worst possible moment. Their orders were simple: watch, report, and if the Germans come in force, fall back. They never got the chance to fall back. At 5:30 in the morning on December 16, 1944, the forest exploded. Not figuratively, literally. Nearly 2,000 German artillery pieces opened fire at the same moment along an 85-mile front. The ground shook, trees split. Men who had been asleep 30 seconds earlier were suddenly running, screaming, dying. This was the opening of the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last desperate gamble to break the Allied line, push through Belgium, and capture the port of Antwerp. Over 200,000 German soldiers, hundreds of tanks, surging forward through fog and snow, and the 99th Infantry Division was standing right in their path. Within hours, the American front was fracturing, units cut off, radio contact lost, supply lines gone. Men scattered in the dark trying to figure out what was happening and who was still alive. Out at the forward post, Brewer's team could feel it all closing in. All morning they were radioing back, German vehicles moving through the trees, infantry columns, the sound of tank tracks on frozen ground getting closer. By 11 in the morning, Brewer was reporting German half-tracks less than 600 yards away. Then the transmissions started getting shorter. By 4 in the afternoon, Brewer came through one last time. Germans were probing the tree line to the north. His team was taking fire. He was requesting permission to pull back. The reply was delayed. The radio operator back at Company B was drowning in emergencies. By the time they sent the authorization, 29 minutes later, there was nothing but static. Captain Whitfield sent a runner. The runner couldn't get through. German activity had completely cut the route. So Whitfield did what commanders have to do in war. He marked all 4 men as missing in action, pulled his remaining forces tight, and tried to hold what he had left. He assumed the 4 men were gone. He was right. He just didn't know the full story yet. Because out in that foxhole, in the frozen dark, something was still happening. German infantry pushing toward the Losheim Gap that night kept running into a problem. Every time they tried to cross the open ground near that tree line, they got shot at. Accurate fire, sustained fire, a machine gun and rifles working in coordination, forcing them back into cover again and again. 3 separate probing attacks, repulsed every time. 2 German soldiers killed, 4 wounded. The German company commander, Hauptmann Werner Kleist, was baffled. His patrol reports described the position as impossible to fix in the darkness. He couldn't tell how many men were in there, couldn't get around them, couldn't silence them. So he called in artillery. At 3:47 in the morning, 12 rounds of 105mm artillery came down on that foxhole. 2 minutes of fire, then silence. German infantry crossed the open ground at 4:10 a.m., rifles ready, expecting a fight, expecting survivors, maybe prisoners. What they found stopped them cold. All 4 men were dead, not freshly dead, not killed by the artillery, dead for hours. Here's where the story becomes something that no one, not the German soldiers who found them, not the American officers who later investigated, not the military historians who've studied it since, has ever been able to fully explain. The forensic assessment of the bodies was clear. Sergeant Brewer had been shot through the chest. Based on the wound and the body temperature in that cold, he had most likely died somewhere between 8 and 9 p.m. the previous evening. That's 7 hours before German soldiers finally crossed that ground. Private Costello, catastrophic shrapnel wounds, dead by around 10 p.m. PFC Haas, wounded, but the wounds alone might not have killed him. What killed him was the cold. He bled out and froze sometime after midnight. And PFC Maury, the 20-year-old farm kid from Iowa, was found still positioned behind his M1919 Browning machine gun. Fatal head wound, ammunition can empty. Let that sit for a moment. These 4 men had been dead for hours, and yet German patrol logs recorded sustained fire from that position between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., the period when, by every medical estimate, all 4 of them were already gone. How? Here's where the story becomes something that no one, not the German soldiers who found them, not the American officers who later investigated, not the military historians who studied it since, has ever been able to fully explain. Look, there are rational explanations, and investigators tried hard to find them. The most likely answer is a relay of survival. Each man kept firing until he couldn't. Brewer goes down at 9 p.m., but the others are still alive. Costello goes down at 10. Haas fights on through the cold until his body gives out. Maury, the youngest, maybe he lasted longest, firing alone in the dark, surrounded by his dead friends, refusing to stop. Maybe it was just that, 4 men dying one at a time, each one buying a little more time for the next. But the timeline has gaps. The rate of fire reported by German patrols in the early hours of the morning is difficult to account for with a single rifleman, let alone a dying one. The truth is, we don't know. And maybe that's the point. What we do know is what those 6 hours meant. Pushing through the Losheim Gap that night was Kampfgruppe Peiper, the most feared armored spearhead in the entire German offensive. 72 tanks, 4,000 men, commanded by SS Colonel Joachim Peiper, a ruthless, brilliant officer who had been told in direct terms, reach the Meuse River within 48 hours or the offensive fails. Every hour he lost mattered. The delays that night, and they were not caused by these 4 men alone, but these 4 men were part of it, pushed Peiper's timetable back just enough. By the time his column reached Stavelot, American engineers had already blown the bridge over the Amblev River. He had to reroute. He lost more time. Fuel began to run out. By December 23rd, Kampfgruppe Peiper was surrounded. The tanks were abandoned. The men escaped on foot through the same frozen forest they had entered as conquerors just 1 week before. One thread in a larger story, but it was a thread. When Captain Whitfield finally stood at that foxhole in early January in the snow, looking at what was left of his 4 missing soldiers, he wrote something in a letter home that has stayed with everyone who has read it since. He said, "I am not a superstitious man, but standing there, I felt that something larger than any of us had been at work in that place. All 4 men received the Silver Star posthumously. Sergeant Brewer received a Distinguished Service Cross recommendation on top of that, approved in February 1945. They are buried at the Henri Chapelle American Cemetery in Belgium, 57 acres, 7,992 graves, white crosses and stars of David stretching across a hillside above a quiet Belgian town that most people have never heard of. Raymond Haas's copy of Emerson came home to Pennsylvania in a small package. His mother kept it on the mantelpiece until she died in 1978. His great-niece has it now, in Lancaster County. The pages still dog-eared, still slightly stained, still creased from a breast pocket in a frozen forest 80 years ago. History doesn't always give you clean answers. Sometimes it just gives you 4 names, a foxhole, and a question that no one has ever been able to answer. How did they hold? Until dawn. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to America and WWII Stories as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.